11 years ago, we were introduced to this guy in movie form. I instantly fell in love with the character. I've always been a fan of Iron Man. I've always been a fan of Batman. I've always been a fan of characters that are able to overcome the fact that they don't have actual superpowers and become superheroes. You can make the argument that being a billionaire in of itself is a superpower. But Iron Man always struck just a chord with me. He was flawed. He wasn't perfect. He had demons, and he always it was always like he would constantly try to do his best, and it always seemed to work out, but my God, he went through a rough patch of trying to get it to work. When Jon Favreau announced, this is even before the movie came out, that it was going to be Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark / Iron Man, I kind of flashed back to when Michael Keaton was announced as Batman. That there was a lot of eyebrow raising, there was a lot of concern, and a lot of it seemed very justified because Robert Downey Jr. had those demons. He had all those things hanging on in his real life that is he going to be able to sustain a movie like this? And the producers, the executives, all the people, they had to be convinced. Jon Favreau, I mean, all the close-knit group to him, I remember seeing many interviews and things with him, and I've always been a fan of Jon Favreau, and they had to convince other people that Robert Downey Jr. was the best person for this role. And we didn't know back then what we were going to find out 11 years later. That even a few years later, that there was a grand story to be told. And it all culminated, starting for some people a couple days ago, but it all culminated for the majority of people in the United States either yesterday or it will happen today. Infinity War set the bar. Endgame blew it out of the water. Before I go any further, I'm already now 4 minutes into it. This is going to be a spoiler video. I've said this time and time again. You cannot give opinions on something, even if you say something is bad. Okay? You are spoiling something. You're not giving away the plot. I've said this for years, and I hate it when people do this. That they'll say, oh my God, I just saw it, loved it. Oh my God, just saw it, hated it. So disappointed. So satisfying. All these things that people will say. Spoil it in the sense that they are ruining the surprise. That they're putting a notion in your mind that somebody was satisfied or somebody was disappointed. No video that talks about it is a non-spoiler. Like, I just watched, shout out to Shartimus Prime, who got to be invited to the Endgame world premiere in Los Angeles. Super jealous, Russ. That's incredible. I got to go to a screening for Ant-Man and the Wasp. I thought that was cool. You kicked my ass, dude. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of where you've come with this. And I'll say it, I'm super jealous. Okay? And yes, I am wearing... I got this shirt, in case anybody's wondering. I got this at Hot Topic. I love it. But I just got done watching his video. There's actually a point that he brings up in it that I want to play and comment on. But he does a Marvel Avengers Endgame movie non-spoiler review. But he talks about how satisfying the movie is, or how, you know, there's certain elements in it. And, you know, like I said, there's going to be spoilers in this video. So if you haven't seen the movie, don't watch the rest of this video. Stop it. Stop it. I don't want to spoil anything for you guys. And so far I haven't, so you don't have to worry. I mean, I'm talking about Iron Man, so it's not that big a deal. Stop watching this video. Please stop watching this video. Come back after you see the movie. Chime in with your stories. But going forward, spoilers! So Russ talks about, you know, the emotional roller coaster that this movie was or is, and how he cried in it. I cried in it. I'm not going to. I'm secure in my manhood, and I have plenty of balls that I can say that I cried watching a movie. My girlfriend and her sister both said that I cried like a little bitch. Excuse the language. I don't really care. Anybody can make fun of me, and that's fine. I'm secure in my own masculinity that I can admit that I cried, and I don't care what you think. But he talks, you know, so like if you tell people that, they're like, oh, I'm not going to tell you what happened in the movie, but I cried. But you're spoiling the surprise. And that's what I feel like. So, like, no spoilers. If you ever give your opinion on a movie, you're spoiling some of the movie. Plain and simple. The movie opens right almost after the events of Infinity War. And that movie, you know, I remember thinking, like, how are they going to top this? There's going to, I mean, it's the part one of a two-part movie, but it really does kind of stand alone. Infinity War is a hero's journey for Thanos. It's not a cliffhanger, really, of sorts. His journey ends. He does what he sets out to do. Now, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the heroes in it, which is what then goes into Endgame, it's not. But Infinity War really is the story arc of Thanos. Or some people think Thanos. Stupid fucking John Deek. Yeah, I said it. Chick-fil-A, not sponsored. But that movie wasn't a cliffhanger of sorts. It ended. There was an end to that movie. But where Endgame picks up, it then picks up the baton and carries the story of the purpose, it seemed, to wrap up and finalize the journeys of many other characters that we've gotten in the original, from the original Avengers. So Iron Man, Captain America, Black Widow, Thor, Hulk, all these characters get a completion to their story arc that started 10 years ago, 11 years ago, some a little bit less. So the movie opens with them coming to grips with what had happened. And it's still on that shocking, very melancholy note that Infinity War left us with. You're left at the end, or when you're watching, you're still dragged in. And they started off right away. Now, I had this theory for some time. Before even knowing, I did not pay any attention to any spoilers. I barely watched any of the trailers. I watched a couple, but I avoided all spoilers and things of that nature. But I had this theory that I remember hearing years ago with Civil War that Hawkeye, Clint, would decide which side he's on because his family was going to be killed in it. Something was going to happen. They were going to go to his farm. His family was going to be killed, and that was going to push him into whichever direction. And I don't remember which side he was going to side with. But I remember that floating around, and it stuck with me. And then when I did see the first trailer with Hawkeye, or Ronin, which honestly I don't think they ever really referred to him as Ronin in Endgame, but it's neither here nor there, right? If you're a comic book fan, you know that that look is what Hawkeye went to. But after hearing that theory and then not seeing that in Civil War, I kind of forgot about it. And then I saw the trailer, and I saw that Hawkeye was back, and I'm like, what if that's what happens? What if his family was part of the snap? And that is what draws him out of retirement and then goes and then brings him back. And that's exactly what we saw. The movie opens showing Hawkeye on his farm and his family disappearing, vanishing. And instantly, within the first 5 minutes of the movie, it's tugging on my heartstrings, right? Not weeping, but a tear happened. So pulls on the heartstrings right away and instantly transports you back a year ago to Infinity War, when you're seeing all these characters just disappear. And you're like, and you're just sitting, you're left in that disbelief. And it's instantly brought back to your mind with the beginning of Endgame. Then it goes to our heroes, and our heroes trying to figure out what to do. You got Black Widow trying to run the Avengers still, not really being too successful at it, it seems. Everybody's branched off in different things, but they're trying their best. And that's when everything like kind of coalesces, because they discover that Thanos snapped his fingers again. And again, that was put in a trailer, but I think it was perceived differently. We come to discover, or they discover where Thanos is. And they all decided to get together, and they're going to go after him again. And this time, they're going to whatever it takes. And they get there, and they discover that Thanos is very weak. He is just kind of being a little farmer dude. He's living off the land. But he severely hurt himself with that second snap. What that sets up is paying off later on in the film, that the force of wielding these Infinity Stones on the body is extreme. And that the first time he did it, he probably was, well, aside from the fact that he just got basically stabbed by Thor. So, I mean, he's wounded from that, but it probably wasn't as bad. I mean, he had a very strong body, and he was able to withstand a lot of that punishment that snapping imposed on him. You could see the damage that was done to the Infinity Gauntlet. I guess it would be on this hand. That was done to it. It like melted the whole thing. And you got to imagine that wear would transport to his body. And we saw that in spades the second time he snapped it. They're all there. All the Avengers are there. They confront him. They want to get the Infinity Stones to undo what he had done. And he's like, I don't have them anymore. And they're like, what? What the hell is what? You're lying. The second snap was revealed that he had accomplished what he needed to do, bringing balance to the universe, about wiping out half of all life in the universe. He brought balance. And he didn't need the Infinity Stones anymore. So the second snap was him destroying the Infinity Stones. And they're gone now. And from that point on, that's when people decide to get pissed. And they think that they have missed their opportunity. And within like 10 minutes of the movie, Thanos is now killed. Because Thor decides he will go for the head. And he chops his head off. So that's when it ends. Well, that's not when it ends. That happens, and then we fast forward 5 years later, where again all of them are off doing their own things. They're trying to live their own lives. They're trying to do what they need to do. One of the most interesting aspects is what happens with Thor. Thor decides that on Earth they're going to create a new Asgard. And that's actually the name of it, New Asgard. Well, he has slightly changed. That was one of the most amazing aspects of the movie. Thor got fat. He looks like the dude from The Big Lebowski. He is bringing the dad bod to glory, I must say. But this is where I was talking about things are wrapped up beautiful. Oh, there's Max. Hi, Max. 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 Who conversely I was going to name him Thor. But I was like, nah, I can't name him Thor. Oh, what is happening? Hey. Look at his little fat butt. Did you see his little fat butt try to run? Oh my god. Okay, so now I should call him Thor because he's a chubby. But this is where I was talking about, like, things start getting wrapped up. This movie does such a tremendous job of wrapping things up that were left behind. At the end of Ragnarok, we see Thanos going to the ship that Thor and everybody's on as they leave Asgard. He's going after the Tesseract, and he knows, he can sense that Loki has it. He knows that it's on that ship. And the beginning of Infinity War, all we see is destruction on that ship. We see Heimdall getting killed. We see Loki getting killed. We see Thor possibly even getting killed. But we're left wondering, what happened to Korg? What happened to Valkyrie? What happened to these characters that we saw from Ragnarok, right? That were on the ship with them. Again, wrapped up nicely in Endgame as we see that Korg and Valkyrie escaped, and they are now with Thor on New Asgard. They've come together, and they're there now. So as all these guys come together, they're, so you have that aspect, and we are then reminded of the events at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp, where Paul Rudd's character is he's trapped in Ant-Man is trapped inside the quantum realm, and he has stayed there for all these 5 years. He doesn't know what happened. He doesn't know about the snap. He doesn't know any of this. A rat, which it's like, really, that's how he's gonna escape? The van has now been put into a storage thing by like police security, and a rat walks across the panel and activates it and spits him out. That's how he escapes. That's how Ant-Man comes out. Um, so now you're looking at him discovering what happened. And that was probably the second time that I got emotional. When he's looking at, they have these big giant wall things, wall segments with names of people of the vanished. And he goes on there trying to see if his daughter is on it. He's freaking out thinking his daughter might be on it. He discovers his name, but not hers. And now it's 5 years later. He goes back home, goes to the house, and he knocks on the door, and you see through the window his daughter looking at him in disbelief because his dad has been gone. Everybody thinks that he was part of that snap. They didn't know. And she comes to the door. They're staring at each other. And they hug, and it was so powerful. The acting, I gotta give Paul Rudd credit for this because the acting was superb. Like the emotion in him, in his face, in the facial expressions was outstanding. I mean, I truly believed that he was heartbroken. And that is a tremendous, tremendous job as an actor. And seeing that, it got me. It's kind of getting me now, thinking back to it. So amazing. So amazing. But that's when he's like, we got to do something. So he decides he wants to go and talk to the Avengers. And he explains to him that he was in the quantum realm and that there's time travel. Because it's 5 years for everybody else. It was only 5 hours for him. He thought he was only gone for 5 hours. He thought he was only trapped in the quantum realm for 5 hours. So everybody, so again, this is where in watching Russ's video, people make speculations. And this is what he kind of was talking about, Russ, or Shartimus Prime, that these people know what they're doing with these movies. We don't. We don't know shit. We watch trailers, we react to them, we think we know, we start making wildly speculative thoughts in things we created in our mind, and then we're either let down, we're like, oh, well, that's not what my mind made, and then we're disappointed because our minds are going to be a whole lot more creative, but in the world of a movie and everything, like, these people know what they're doing with what they have. And so we're all thinking that at the end of Ant-Man and Wasp, where Mrs. Pym, I forgot her name, or the Michelle Pfeiffer character, she's talking about watch out for the time vortexes because if you get in there, and like, oh wait, time vortex, maybe that's how they do it. Maybe they go through the time thing there, and that's kind of what they do, but we don't. I mean, my mind didn't necessarily think in terms of what, I guess I had a different perception, and that's again where don't perceive things, just wait till you see it. And he's like, I don't know how it works, but one of you guys you have to know how this works. And they start talking about possibly time traveling to the past to be able to collect these Infinity Stones to undo. They want to go back to that original plan before the Infinity Stones were destroyed. Go back in time, collect them, undo the snap with the new snap. And it's a terrific idea, but they don't know how they're going to do it. So they go to try to talk to Bruce Banner. Bruce Banner, now, again, a story arc full circle. I remember reading them, Kevin Feige talk about how they weren't going to do a solo Hulk movie again. But from Ragnarok to Infinity War to Endgame, they were going to have an arc for him that would resolve all this kind of stuff. So like a little mini movie in there. And we saw it with Ragnarok. We saw him starting to develop as a character, more so. the intelligence from Bruce Banner kind of seeping into the physical persona of the Hulk. We got that a little bit more with Infinity War. That Hulk was a consciousness. There's two. You got a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing going on, and it was a lot of people said that it was Hulk being afraid of fighting Thanos, and again, this was us just speculating. Realistically, what it was that the Hulk was tired of being Bruce Banner's problem solver, and he didn't want to do it anymore. He was tired of being beat down, and he got beat down by Thanos, and he was tired of that. And he's like, I don't want to be, and this is essentially what it was, that he did not want to be the cure, or, and that's, in this movie, we are introduced to what the comics had always had, which was Professor Hulk, which is a combination of the mind of Bruce Banner and the physical strength and body of the Hulk working together. And that's what we saw towards the end of Infinity War, where Bruce is like, Hulk, when we get out of this, we need to have a talk. So you got to assume that that conversation between the two minds happened, because in Endgame, we see it. The physical manifestation of Professor Hulk. And Bruce/Hulk talks about how this is not his area of expertise. He doesn't understand time stuff. He doesn't get it. So this was, oh, and I completely skipped. Oh, there's so much to this movie. The very beginning is, we go towards the beginning right after we see Hawkeye. We're shown Tony, Iron Man. And he looks very sick, very emaciated, starving. He's starved himself. 23 days or something, not eating, not drinking like they should be. His body is very like thin now, and you can really see it. And they did a tremendous job for the visual effects. And he is saved by Captain Marvel. Okay, Captain Marvel, I enjoyed the movie, but it's not one of my favorites. I personally feel, and this even carries in here with Endgame, I personally feel that you could have completely left out Captain Marvel from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it wouldn't have mattered. When I watched Infinity War, all of these characters were separated. Like, the Avengers were pulled apart. And you had Tony, you had Doctor Strange, you had Iron Man, you had Star-Lord, all fighting Thanos. And they almost beat him by themselves. While Thor and Captain America and Hulk were all on Earth fighting the other forces. You bring them together, I feel like they would have been able to beat, like, Thanos when he was on Titan, but whatever. So I was really worried that they were like, oh, we're going to bring in Captain Marvel. I was like, please don't let her be how Thanos is defeated. Because that really was going to piss me off. Because these characters have had this whole arc, and you just drop a movie 2 months ago on us with Captain Marvel, and now she's going to be the one that's going to save everybody? Come on. So thank God that didn't happen. So again, another instance where don't let your mind decide. These people know what they're doing. Iron Man is discovered by Captain Marvel, and Captain Marvel brings him and Nebula back to Earth, which sparks this huge battle. They want to go off and they want to get Thanos again, and Iron Man's like, no, like, we tried, we failed. And then he gets pissed off at Captain America, and I loved this aspect because he totally called Captain out. He's like, you were gone. You took your shit and you ran and you hid. We could have been together. You said that when we fight, we'll do this together. And he's like, I said we'll lose. And you said that we'll do that together too. But you weren't here. You left us. So he's pissed. He still harbors that anger towards Captain America. And this is where I feel one of the aspects that I wish they would have done is if Cap would have said, you're right, Tony. I'm sorry. If he would have apologized, I feel that would have gone a long way towards helping things. And it would have made the, later on when they decide to work together, and you saw it in the trailer, Iron Man, Tony says, like, do you trust me? And Cap is like, I do. I felt like that would have been a better payoff of that scene because Cap lied to Iron Man for a number of years about how, and it's not an outright lie because he didn't come out and said, hey, Cap, do you know how my parents died? But a liable mission is still a lie. And he had that information. He never told it to him to protect his friend Bucky. So I feel like he owed him a little bit of an apology. And I feel like had he done that, then that scene where he's like, do you trust me? I do. I thought that would have been more powerful because that would have shown that originally Cap didn't trust Iron Man. From the very beginning, when they were first introduced. Like, what are you? You know, you take your suit away, you're nothing. So I felt like that would have gone a little bit further, but that's just a personal thing for me. He's like, I'm not going to help you. I'm going to go. And so he leaves. He goes to his room. He's healing. All this stuff is going on. And that's when they decide they're going to go after Thanos and everything. Fast forward to them trying to get everybody together with Scott Lang giving them this information about time travel. Bruce can't figure it out, so they decide to go to the next guy. Tony Stark. Fast forward, we see Tony is living a very secluded life. Very simple life of sorts for him. With his wife, Pepper Potts, and their beautiful daughter, Morgan. And I feel like there was a little bit of foreshadowing here that Tony had started creating the rescue suit, which is something from the comics again, which is something that Pepper Potts wore in the comics. And he was going to give to her, and he's like, yeah, she usually doesn't like the stuff that I give her anyhow. But we see Morgan wearing the helmet. And I feel like that may be a bit of foreshadowing. We'll see. Time will tell. But they're talking to Tony, and Tony's like, no, I'm not going to help you guys. Because you can't screw with time. You can't mess with it. You don't know what it's going to end up messing up. And they're like, that I understand, and Cap's like, I understand where he's coming from. He has created a life. He could completely wipe out what he has built, which he loves, a family. He could potentially wipe that out in favor of getting everything that everybody else lost. He doesn't want to help them, but it weighs on his mind. So as they leave, Tony's restless. He can't ever stop thinking of stuff. And he decides to solve it and figure it out himself. With the aid of Pepper saying, he's like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm just going to throw this off into the ocean. And he's like, saying all this stuff. Pepper's like, but will you really let it go? Knowing that he won't. So he goes back, sets things up with the Avengers, and they proceed to do what they need to do. And that is split into different groups and go to different times where the Infinity Stones are. One of one of the parts that I loved about this is that the time travel aspect, which has been wildly speculated for a long time, we've seen like set photos of Captain America, Iron Man, or Tony Stark, and Ant-Man in New York from the Battle of New York, the first Avenger movie. And we're like, wait a minute, why would Ant-Man be there? So all this stuff basically was accurate. And but you know, we got to see how it plays out, right? So they all decide to go to different time frames and collect these different Infinity Stones. So, like for example, the Scepter, which has the Mind Stone, the Tesseract, which has the Space Stone, and the Eye of Agamotto, which has the Time Stone. They're all in New York. So they're like, you know, well, 3 of the Infinity Stones are all in one place at basically the same time. So we can do this pretty easily. First, we see Bruce gets sent to collect the Time Stone. Except it's a little bit early for Doctor Strange to have it. So we then get to see the Ancient One. And that was an aspect that I loved about these movies. They pulled characters from previous movies back into it to be able to round things out. So we get the Ancient One back in. And the thing that I loved about her being back in it was, and it really makes me wish that they didn't kill her off in the first movie, because she brought a sense of wisdom to things. And Bruce is trying to talk to her, and she's like, no, I'm not going to give you the Time Stone. What you're saying sounds ridiculous. And he goes through, he keeps talking, and it's like, where's Doctor Strange? And she's like, you're about 5 years too early for Doctor Strange. He's down the street performing surgery right now. Which I love, because it shows that she's aware of what is eventually going to happen. And you could see that. The fact that she, like, harnesses dark energy to see into the future. Granted, it's only the future of her time, like, on Earth. You can only see to the end of your life, which is why she can never see beyond a certain point, because she would die, and then she couldn't see beyond that. So she could not see the coming of Thanos to know that that's what Bruce needed the stones for. She could only see to the point where Doctor Strange would basically become the Sorcerer Supreme, and therefore be charged with protecting the Eye of Agamotto, which has a Time Stone. And he said, like, and then Bruce talks about Doctor Strange giving the Time Stone away freely. And she's like, he gave it away freely? And he's like, yeah. And she's confused. She's dumbfounded. She's like, Stephen Strange is meant to represent the best of us, the best of all the Sorcerer Supremes. So if he did it for a reason, if he gave it away freely, there must have been a reason for it. And that reason must tie into now her giving it away as well. They need it. And that's what she basically came to realize. I loved that scene. That whole scene with Bruce and her was fantastic. And I love that they brought her back. There's a few other ones. Again, they're going and getting the different stones and such. Tony meets his dad, actually. And there was some foreshadowing with this, where this is where I started feeling that something bad was going to happen to Tony, because he got to talk to his dad, which he never got to say goodbye to his dad or anything like that. And he got to give him a hug and kind of say goodbye to him and talk to him without his dad knowing that his name was Tony Stark or anything. I think he said his name was Potts. His last name was Potts. But that's a scene that was really warming to see. I really like that. One of the other ones that I absolutely loved was Thor. he goes back to the time of the Dark World to collect the ether from Jane Foster, who this was kind of a thing. Like, everybody was wildly crazy that Natalie Portman was actually at the premiere for Endgame, and they're like, why is she here? Or yeah, why is she here? That doesn't make any sense, especially since she basically told the MCU to fuck off after they fired the director of Dark World. She basically stepped out and like refused essentially to do anything else. So to see her here was very confusing, and people again started speculating. It came out around the same time that information started floating around that there's going to be a Thor 4. Who knows? But all of this came together, and Thor, in his chubby self, goes, and he has a hard time with this because of the emotional baggage that he has of failing to prevent Thanos from killing everybody, and now faced with the prospect that he's going to possibly see people in his past again that are no longer there for other reasons, who, as it turns out, is his mother, Freya. Now, that was, one of the most emotional aspects. I really liked Thor: The Dark World. That was, I have no problem with it. A lot of people do. A lot of people don't like the original Thor movies and like Ragnarok more. I'm the reverse. I think that the first two movies are the best. Ragnarok I like, but not as much as the originals. It gives a different tone to it. I didn't like, not that Ragnarok was bad, but I feel like the humor was too much, and it took something away. There was always humor in Thor movies, but I feel like they made it more of a comedy to suit audiences that didn't really like the. I mean, like the fear for Guardians of the Galaxy was these are characters that we really don't know, but the comedy really made it where people liked them. And I feel like they tried doing that with Ragnarok to make it more acceptable, I guess. And I didn't like that. So, it is what it is. But Freya comes into this and instantly recognizes that Thor isn't the Thor that she knows. And one of the elements that I really liked about Dark World over Ragnarok was that despite the fact that they were just engaged in a battle in Dark World with the Dark Elves, there was time put in to show the mourning of the loss of their queen, their mother, all the other people that died at the hands of the Dark Elves. And there was that kind of, even later, when it was Thor and Loki talking about their mother, there were elements that came in, and the death of Freya really showed that Loki, there is good in Loki, and he's still served by his own selfish ambitions, but that was still his mother, and he still loved her. He loved his father, as we saw later on with Infinity War. But Dark World was a unique situation. So getting her in it again, talking to Thor, saying, don't be who you're supposed to be. Be who you're meant to be. Be true to yourself. And that was basically, he's not a king. He is a warrior, he's a protector, but he's not a king. He doesn't have those qualities. He's not a leader. And that's something that we got through many, many other Thor films, that he can be powerful and everything. People will look to him, but he's not a leader. And Freya was telling him that. And that was another really emotional part where I got a little bit choked up watching it. Meanwhile, Rocket is off trying to find Jane Foster and to get the ether out of her, which he does. Fast forward to the end of that little bit where Thor and Rocket are about to leave, and again, his mother is like, and he's like, I wish I didn't have to go. I don't want to go. And she's like, you have to. You don't belong here. This though was a gift. And you know, as somebody who has lost his own father, there's always that. You wish you could just have one more conversation with that person that you love. Um, and Thor got to have that with his mom, which was incredible. I love that. I love that scene. And through this whole thing, he has beaten himself up. He's let his body go. All he does is sit around and drink. He doesn't come out, talk to his people, nothing. He just is a shut-in. And while he's sitting there, Mjolnir comes to him, and it's like, woo, Brenda's back, mew mew. I mean, let's be honest, Stormbreaker is badass, but Mjolnir is iconic with him, and he takes Mjolnir with him because and that's the thing that he says. He's like, I'm still worthy, which he probably didn't think he was because of what he had messed up. But Mjolnir recognized him as still being worthy and went to him. So he takes that back, and now he's got Stormbreaker, he's got Mjolnir. He is ready to kick ass, right? The next aspect, I'm not going to get through all the stones, but the next one that really plays into it is the Power Stone. That is what was collected in the original Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And War Machine and Nebula go to, I forgot the name of the planet, but go to collect that. The problem with that, though, is it basically puts you at the same time as past Thanos, past Gamora, past Nebula, also looking for these stones and trying to collect them. And when they get to this planet, Nebula warns War Machine to take cover. We should be careful and wait things out because they're not the only ones looking for this. And Rhodey's like, what do you mean? And she's like, I'm looking for this. Past self is looking for this. They get the stone. They go and they take it out of the spear thing. They have it. And then we zoom over to the past versions of Thanos, Nebula, and Gamora all talking. And that Nebula then just goes, her brain starts going crazy. And like, what the hell's going on? And then she, like, a projection comes out, and it's War Machine and her talking in the future, right? Or it's all convoluted, but you get the point. And Thanos is like, Gamora's like, oh, she must be just glitching or something. Because at this point, Gamora already knows where, like, the Soul Stone is, and she's trying to prevent her dad covertly from collecting them all. So I think she's trying to throw off the trail here because she sees this and she's like, shit, we got to say something. So she basically is like, she's glitching. But Thanos is like, let's hook her up to a diagnostic and find out. Hooks her up and discovers what is basically happening. That this is a future Nebula and future other Terran. And they see all these other things that future Nebula has witnessed, and they're playing back her memories. And Thanos is like, I did it. I got them all. In the future, I will have all of these stones, and I will accomplish my goal. Interesting. So, they decide that they're going to go after him. So, as Rhodey and Nebula are about to depart back in time, they have like a thing that only allows them to time travel once, or back and forth. One way, then the other way. Nebula, who shares a neural link with her previous self, is prevented from traveling back in time. And she's like kind of damaged. So that's how they are able to get her. Old Nebula decides to swap places with the new Nebula. And go back into the future. Back to the future. And they all get there at the same time. So nobody's too worried about it. I guess I do kind of have to go through a couple other stones. So now everybody's kind of back. Except for Black Widow. We are again taken to Vormir with Hawkeye and Black Widow. Now, they didn't put 2 and 2 together initially, but they start to. As they meet the Red Skull again, who tells them the story, what they need to do. They then realize that Gamora did not come back, but Thanos did come back with the Soul Stone. They put 2 and 2 together. One of them will have to die. And this was a little bit, this wasn't, you knew what was going to happen because you had already gotten that information from Infinity War. So you knew that one of these 2 people were going to have to die. And I felt like that might have been one of the weaker elements of the film. Just because maybe we already knew what was going to happen. So it kind of desensitized us. Or at least me. But there's a battle back and forth between who's going to do it. Hawkeye or Black Widow. Ultimately, Black Widow is the one who sacrifices herself. And it leads in because if they succeed in doing this, and they bring the people back that were originally lost in the first snap, Clint will bring back his family. He has more to gain by being successful with this. In order to get this stone, though, you have to commit a soul for a soul. So, if he sacrificed himself, Black Widow would survive, but not really get anything back from the snap. Clint would. So Natasha, in her mind, decides what's going to happen. And then there's a back and forth. She starts running. Then he trips her. And then, it's like a, back and forth. And she finally jumps, or he jumps, and then she shoots a line that wraps around, and then they go swinging down, and Clint is holding on to her, and she's like, let me go. And he does. And she goes down, she dies. She now has, it's windy, can you see that? And now he has a soul stone, and he returns, and people they're like, what, where's Nat? And they know that she didn't come back. That part, like I said, was a little bit, I feel, of a disservice to the power of the scene, because we had already seen it. And we already knew in order to get the Soul Stone, especially when it was those 2 people assigned to that task, somebody wasn't going to come back. And that was, it was sad, but like I said, I feel like it could have been more powerful of a scene. I don't know how they could have done that differently, honestly, but I feel like the response was lessened because of that emotionalness of seeing Thanos kill his daughter to get it. So all of them come back. They all have the stones. They succeed in getting everything. And that's where I'm going to leave this. Suffice it to say that a gigantic battle ensues, and well, no, okay. So let me wrap up that. Now Nebula here is in the future and proceeds to pull Thanos from the past, because remember, he's dead in the future. Pulls him through the whole time vortex thingy that everybody else was traveling through. Pulls him and his basically entire fleet through this tunnel. And now Thanos is here. And all the Infinity Stones are in one place for him to gather. Which makes it so much easier for him. And then through this whole process, like I said, the battle ensues. Ultimately, what ends up happening is that they succeed in bringing everybody back. The gauntlet is built into an arm thing that the Hulk wears. He's the only one powerful enough to be able to absorb the power and the stress on the body. And that was extreme for him. He looked like he almost lost it that one time. Which you gotta believe then that's what would have happened to Thanos the first time, that he would have almost lost it. But he chose to do it a second time, which made it even worse. So you still got to believe that Thanos is ultimately more powerful than any of the Avengers, including the Hulk. But the Hulk survived that snap, and it brought people back. And it kind of answered one of those questions. Was it just half of all people in the universe or half of all life? And that was kind of answered in the fact that, number one, we then see Clint's phone ringing, and it's his wife. Which is like, oh. And you see Ant-Man walking towards a little garden. And there's a tree there. And there's butterflies or birds flying. They're back. Which answers the question, it was all life. So this talk, people were talking that while Thanos' idea was to wipe out half of all, like, people to bring balance, because there was a finite amount of resources in the universe, if you remember. He didn't take into account that all life, all the resources, the animals that people will eat, the plants that people will eat, all of that's gone as well. Half of all of that is gone as well. So the ratio stayed the same. So if you have 10 billion people and there's not enough food to feed those 10 billion, I'm blocking my head, 10 billion people, if you reduce it to 5 billion people, you still also reduce the amount of resources that were out there. So his theory was flawed, as all bad guys have flawed theories. So they battle, they fight. One of the best cheering parts in the whole movie where everybody exploded was the reveal that Captain America has now become worthy of Mjolnir. He picks it up. He wields the power of Thor, and my God, it was glorious. I feel like he used Mjolnir better than Thor ever did. Like, he'd throw up his shield, he would hit it with the hammer, he would hit Thanos, back and forth battling. It was amazing, using the lightning and the thunder. It was so good. So satisfying to see that, especially when it zooms in on Thor, and he's like, I knew it! And he was excited, because there was somebody else that's worthy of it, I guess. I don't know exactly why he was excited, because he seemed very worried in Age of Ultron that it happened, or almost happened. So the movie ends, and it goes back to, well, Tony Stark. Well, the movie doesn't end. Okay, so it goes back to Tony Stark. And they brought back everybody. But now his entire force is here, and he's trying to get the new gauntlet with all the stones on there. And it's a battle to see who gets the gauntlet on him first to win this battle. And it ultimately is Tony, who the stones go onto his Iron Man arm, and Tony snaps his fingers. And all of Thanos' forces vanish. The force and power of wielding the Infinity Stones almost killed Thanos previously. Almost killed the Hulk. These were very powerful creatures. Tony is just a man. It ends up killing him. And this is where I got really kind of choked up. The biggest part being that all this time, as flawed as Tony Stark is, every decision he ever made, from the very first Iron Man movie to this, through the different Avenger movies, creating Ultron, wanting to create Ultron, having the Hall of Armor, everything was done to protect the people he loves. Mainly Pepper. But now, he has a daughter. And he wanted to desperately protect them more than anything else. And he sacrificed himself, as he has tried to do in every single movie when you think about it. From the first Avenger movie to him taking the nuclear missile up into space, getting trapped and possibly not being able to come back, to very luckily coming back, to everything else. He's always trying to sacrifice himself. To the very first Iron Man movie, when he's on the top of the building fighting Obadiah, he tells Pepper to hit the giant arc reactor to make it explode up. And she's like, "You're up there, it'll kill you." He's like, "Do it!" He just ultimately always wanted to do what was right, and that was protect the people that he loves. And he's laying there. Peter Parker comes over. Everybody's restored, remember. So Peter comes over, and there's a very emotional scene where Peter is like, "Mr. Stark, Mr. Stark, it's okay. It's okay. You'll be okay." And he's definitely emotional. And then Pepper comes into it. And they're looking at each other. And she's just like, "We'll be okay. You can rest now." And he just fades away. Like I said, all of this started 2008 with what Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. Envisioned. And we all knew that this was something that was going to happen. We all knew someone was going to die. We didn't know if it was going to be Cap. We didn't know if it was going to be Iron Man. I feel like when we got the teaser for Spider-Man Far From Home, where we only saw Happy in it, that could have been just they didn't want to spoil it, but a lot of people then started speculating that Tony was gone. So I'm definitely curious to see that movie now and see how that kind of ties in to what's happening here. That comes out in a couple months. It's this summer. But I'm, as I said, a huge Iron Man fan. And part of me was heartbroken in the fact that we're not going to have Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man anymore. Iron Man, for all intent and purposes, is gone. He sacrificed himself to save everybody. And I know that it's just a movie. But after 11 years, you invest yourself into these characters. You cheer with them, you cry with them, and Tony, I know, is not a real character. I'm not some kind of Momo, but it was a very powerful moment, very sombering moment as me and my girlfriend were driving back home, and it's like, that's it. Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man, he's gone. We're not going to see him anymore. So, it was very sombering, a very sombering time. It also ends with, like I said, tying up loose ends. It happens in a lot of these. It happened perfectly. There's not a time in the movie. I feel like this movie was a perfect time travel movie. One of the things that's explained to Bruce by the Ancient One is that when these stones are taken out of their place, it will create an alternate timeline. Unless things are returned at the exact moment they were taken. Then you'll be fine. Then everything else can still progress. So, time-wise, all this stuff is going to happen again. Thanos is going to eventually collect all these stones. The Battle of New York is still going to happen. All of this stuff is going to happen as the past catches up to what is our present. It all will continue on. Because Captain America decided he was going to go and return everything. Which, one of the things was, I was like, wait a minute. Thor took Mjolnir from that time, so does that mean that Thor there now doesn't have it? Well, I completely forgot that Captain America took that back with him. And that got returned as well. So, again, everything is very neatly tied up. He goes back, he returns everything, and in one of the final messages, Tony talked about living your life. And while Cap was in the past, decided to live his life. He was always going to be returned. Time-wise, it was only a matter of a few seconds, but for him, it was years. Many, many years, as he stayed there. And went back and had a life, and we are to presume married Agent Carter, Peggy Carter, the love of his life. Because he came back old, like old man old, with a wedding ring. And so we all knew that Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. didn't renew any further contracts. So we knew that something was going to happen. And Chris Evans did say that if he's ever asked to come back for a cameo or something like that, he's on board for doing that. But the movie ends with Steve Rogers handing off the reins of sorts to Falcon and gives him his shield, which is a past version of the shield that was brought back because through the battle with Thanos, his actual shield, which was given back to him by Tony, was destroyed for the most part. That was another kind of shocking moment, that the double-bladed weapon that Thanos had was able to slice into his vibranium shield, and it got shattered, which was one of those kind of moments. He hands off the shield to Falcon, and he's like, "How's it feel?" And Falcon's like, "Feels like it's someone else's." And, you know, Cap is like, it's yours now. So, so everybody is saying that this movie is deeply satisfying, and I agree on the premise that just about every single loose end that I could think of was tied up nicely. Even nods to other things like Loki. So they were up in the penthouse of the Avengers Tower with Loki there, and Loki's like, you know, if it's all the same, I'd like to have that drink. And he starts running his mouth, and Thor turns around and slaps that muzzle over him, which we saw at the end of Avengers. Like, oh, why is that on him? You know, now it just kind of is like one of those small little things. As I said, I feel like there was some foreshadowing with Morgan Stark wearing the Iron Man helmet. I feel like, you know, in terms of storytelling, you don't put things like that in a movie unless you plan on paying it off eventually. And the folks over at Marvel, Kevin Feige, are amazingly good at doing that kind of stuff. So the movie was greatly satisfying for me. It was an emotional roller coaster. I felt the action was fantastic. The dialogue was amazing. The pacing was really good. This is a over 3 hour long movie, which everybody talks about. Which that over 3 hours, it's a little bit skewed because that also is about 15 minutes of end credits. Which this is, to my knowledge, the only Avenger movie or the only Marvel movie from the MCU that does not have any mid or post credit scenes. There's nothing. So when the movie's over, you can get up and leave. Which, if you're watching this and you haven't seen the movie, you're probably completely spoiled by it now. If you don't care about spoilers and you watch this, when you do see it, you don't have to stay and watch anything. For a long time, I've always kind of looked at Back to the Future as being the pinnacle of a time travel movie in terms of wrapping everything up nicely. I feel like this is the best time travel movie I've ever seen. It wraps up everything beautifully. It leaves things up to again, shout out to Shardimus because he talked about this. He says that he's not worried about the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I kind of have to disagree with that. I feel like the investment that people have made into characters such as Iron Man and Captain America and Thor has been built over these 10 years. There's a strong sense that these, you know, characters were, you know, deeply rooted. The only thing that I feel like we really have left is the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie, which seems to now include Thor with them as Guardians of the Galaxy. As Thor decides to go off, he is handed the keys of New Asgard off to Valkyrie. She is now the queen of New Asgard. He's going off in the galaxy, and he's doing it with the Guardians, which is interesting because that was a scene that kind of leads in. That might be the only kind of tease as to what is happening, because Star-Lord is looking for Gamora. When Thanos came to the present from the past, and he brought all of his destruction, he brought Gamora with him. Which that Gamora exists because she was a past Gamora. The Gamora that he knows is dead. Everybody, and people talked about this, like the producers talked about this. The people that died in the movie remain dead. The other ones are just vanished. They're vanished. We don't know where they went to. Maybe they went to the Soul Universe. Who knows? But they vanished and they were brought back. The people that died. So, in order to, attain these Infinity Stones. So the original Gamora, to get that original Soul Stone, she stays dead. Loki stays dead. Vision stays dead. The Gamora that came is from the past. But she's gone. She disappeared. So did she get wiped out when Tony snapped his fingers and made all of Thanos' forces disappear? Because maybe she was turning, or maybe she ran. Maybe she left the battle or something. So I feel like that's where they may go with Guardians of the Galaxy. It's, it's like Star Trek, the search for Spock. This is Guardians of the Galaxy, the search for Gamora. But I feel like Thor is going to be part of that adventure. So we have a vested interest in those characters. And then Spider-Man. And we're getting a new Spider-Man movie here in a couple months. I don't know what the future is beyond that, honestly. But there's talk about other movies that they're going to do. And that obviously now with Disney buying Fox, you have a whole potential of a whole new potential of Marvel movies with X-Men, Fantastic Four, all that. So I'm not necessarily concerned about that, but in terms of what we have here with this lineage, I don't know what we're going to have. So Shardimus was talking about he's not worried about the future. I kind of am. We don't know if we're getting another Doctor Strange movie. I would love another Doctor Strange movie. Black Panther, I think we're getting, there's been rumor about a sequel to that. There's several Disney Plus, which is their new streaming service series, where Loki's going to be in it, but how's that going to happen? There's going to, like, a whole new Loki series, and there's another Falcon and Winter Soldier. They unveiled that, the logo for it. I mean, that makes a little bit more sense if Falcon is going to be the new Captain America, which is something that happened in the comics. I'm glad to see that they're keeping Bucky as Bucky, or Winter Soldier or whatever, and Falcon taking up the mantle of Captain America. There's Max! There he is! Hi! Beep. Beep. So there is concerns on my point of view for the future, but I've only seen Endgame once so far. I'm sure there's going to be multiple viewings of it. So those are my thoughts, guys. If you sat here and watched this, is an over hour-long video. If you sat and watched this whole thing, God bless you. Thank you so much. I know these videos don't get a lot of views or traffic or anything, but I just like sharing my thoughts and getting them out there. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. If you haven't seen the movie but still watch this video, thank you so much. That's absolutely terrific. If you made it this far, you probably have already seen it. So join the discussion. Feel free to leave comments down in the video, or down in the comment section. If people are going to read through the comments, then they're, looking for spoilers themselves, because the title of this movie is going to say spoilers in it. So I don't want to hear anybody bitching. 11 years. It began in, one of the last lines for Tony Stark in that first movie was, "I am Iron Man." And the last line for Tony Stark in this I am Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr. Has been rightly given the title of the Godfather of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If that movie didn't work, I don't think none of the other ones would have. Just the success of that just spawned everything else. Thank you to you, sir. You're never going to see this video. You're never going to sit and watch this whole thing. You're never going to find it or see it in general, but you have my gratitude for a wild ride for this past decade. Thank you for everything that you did. That's it. Who, as it turns out, is his mother, Freya. Now,